Oh my God, how could she possibly do that? The wealthy single father walked into a small seaside diner in California, only to witness a waitress feeding his disabled child, and that very moment changed her life forever. You won't believe what I'm about to tell you. A famous millionaire, the kind of man who once signed multi-million-dollar contracts, yet in front of his disabled daughter, he was nothing more than a helpless father. Night after night, he sat by the window, a glass of liquor in hand, his heart shattered by the silence of his child. Who was that mysterious young woman, appearing out of nowhere as if fate itself had sent her? And why did she become the very key to this family's survival? Stay with me until the end. In Monterey, California, where the Pacific Ocean stretches out like an endless blue mirror, there are days when the waves crash against the cliffs like invisible drums, echoing in the chests of those who feel lost. Ethan Caldwell, once celebrated on Forbes 40 Under 40 with a powerful image and a confident stance beside billion-dollar deals, now found himself walking into a small diner called Harbor Light Cafe, a place he never imagined would become part of his life. People were used to seeing Ethan at lavish conferences in San Francisco, where glasses of wine overflowed and a single handshake could be worth an entire startup. But tonight, there were no crystal chandeliers, no pristine white tablecloths, only the soft yellow glow of a seashell lamp and the scent of roasted coffee mingling with the salty dampness of the sea air. He sat down on an old wooden chair, listening to it creak as if to remind him this was not the world of power or wealth, but a world of simplicity, where wounds were quietly hidden behind everyday smiles. Beside him was Lily, his 8-year-old daughter, her small body almost disappearing into the silver wheelchair. Her wide brown eyes had once been compared to a clear night sky, but now they wandered into some distant void. Ever since the accident 3 years ago, the same instant that had taken his wife away, Lily had closed the doors of her soul, leaving Ethan with a vast house full of emptiness. He loved her more than anything. Loved her so much that every morning, before checking the stock market, the first thing he did was walk into Lily's room, gently touch her soft hair, just to be sure she was still there, still breathing, still alive. But love does not always mean salvation. Every day, Ethan saw his own helplessness more clearly. He could move massive numbers, persuade the most skeptical investors with a few charts and a firm voice, but he could not make his daughter smile again. Lily's silence was his greatest failure, a failure no journalist had ever written about. Soft country music drifted through the diner, "Take Me Home," country roads spilling out of an old speaker, slightly static, yet still enough to make a few regulars tap their feet. And in that space, a gentle figure approached. Claire Donovan, the waitress with auburn hair tied up neatly, a few loose strands brushing against her freckled cheeks like punctuation marks of an untold story. Her emerald eyes caught the golden light, but deep within them lingered a sorrow not easily erased. She placed a small notebook on the table and smiled. Her smile wasn't the dazzling kind from a toothpaste commercial. It was soft, like moonlight slipping through a curtain warm enough to make someone feel a little less alone. Her voice flowed gently, like the ocean breeze passing through an open window. "What would you like to order tonight?" Ethan hesitated. How long had it been since someone asked him such a simple question without the weight of profit or million-dollar decisions attached? He looked at Lily, sighed, and replied almost absent-mindedly, "A sandwich for himself and a bowl of oatmeal for his daughter." Oatmeal, the only thing Lily would eat, though barely more than a few spoonfuls before pushing it away. Claire nodded, jotting quickly into her notebook. In that fleeting moment, her eyes fell on Lily. Her brows tightened ever so slightly, as though she had sensed a story buried beneath the silence. Just for a second, and then she returned to her gentle demeanor, continuing her work. But Ethan had seen it. Something in Claire's gaze stirred his heart, not the stir of a man toward a woman, but the fragile feeling that maybe, just maybe, someone had finally seen the pain he had been hiding all along. That night, Ethan did not yet know that a simple act of ordering a meal would set into motion a chain of events that would change his life forever. Could an ordinary waitress in Monterey accomplish what dozens of renowned doctors and therapists had failed to do? Do you believe a stranger could be the one to make little Lily smile for the very first time in 3 years? All right, let's return to the story. If you're listening right now and feel your heart stir, hit like, subscribe, and leave me a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It's always wonderful to see how our community reaches across the world. The moment the bowl of oatmeal was placed on the table, Ethan felt his heart sink like lead. He lifted the spoon, his fingers trembling slightly, as if bracing himself for a trial he already knew would end in failure. In front of him, Lily sat motionless, her wide brown eyes lost in some faraway void, utterly indifferent to the steaming food before her. Ethan drew in a deep breath, trying to conceal his tension. He leaned in, bringing the spoon close to his daughter's tightly closed lips, when suddenly her small hand jerked violently. The spoon clattered to the floor, hot porridge splattering across the pristine white tablecloth. A faint sound rang out, metal striking ceramic, yet to Ethan, it was the familiar toll of defeat. He caught the hushed murmurs from nearby tables, the curious glances sneaking in his direction. He should not have cared. After all, he was the man who once stood before thousands, delivering confident speeches about the future of technology. But now, shame and helplessness weighed upon him, pressing into his throat until it closed tight. He despised himself for it. Despised the fact that he could not even build the tiniest bridge to reach his daughter's heart. And then, the most unexpected thing happened. Claire, the red-haired waitress who had just turned away less than a minute ago, stopped and gently knelt beside Lily. No hesitation, no judgment, only a smile, a soft smile, carrying no trace of pity, but instead, glowing like the first light of spring, slipping through a window into a room long kept dark. She did not say much. She simply picked up another spoon, still carrying a trace of oatmeal, and lifted it toward Lily's lips with a movement so natural that no one could have guessed this was a task others had deemed impossible. Ethan held his breath. For 3 long years, dozens of renowned therapists from Stanford to UCLA had tried everything: music therapy, light therapy, endless hours of guided conversation. All had failed. And now, in this humble cafe, an ordinary waitress was attempting what millions of dollars could not buy. Lily tilted her head slightly. For a moment, Ethan was certain she would turn away, as she always did. But then, her small lips parted just barely, just enough for the spoon to slip in. The warm oatmeal touched her tongue. Ethan stopped breathing. Claire stopped breathing. And then, as if by miracle, Lily's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. Not clear, not radiant, but enough to make the whole room feel as though it had been lit from within. Ethan froze. In that moment, time itself seemed to halt. He gazed at his daughter, fighting back the surge of emotion rising in his chest, terrified that if he blinked, it would all vanish like an illusion. For 3 years, his home had echoed only with silence. For 3 years, he had buried his hope beneath clinical reports and cold statistics, and now, a single smile, fleeting though it was, shattered every wall he had built inside his heart. There was a cruel irony in it all, a kind of bitter humor. He had spent millions on cutting-edge treatments, entire teams of doctors in white coats, clinics filled with sophisticated machines. Yet what all those experts had failed to accomplish was done by a young woman in a flour-stained apron, her hands still dusted from the kitchen. Perhaps the universe carried its own strange sense of humor. Claire remained there, silent, her emerald eyes glowing with a light both patient and warm. She seemed to understand that if she spoke, the fragile smile might vanish. So she only smiled a smile in return, as gentle as a passing breeze. Ethan could not find words. His throat closed, his heart breaking apart and being pieced back together all at once. For the first time in 3 endless years, he believed maybe, just maybe, there was still hope. And dear listener, do you think that little smile was just a fleeting moment? Or was it the very first sign of a miracle about to unfold? That night, inside the oceanfront villa in Carmel, Ethan Caldwell sat in silence before the wide glass window. Outside, waves pounded relentlessly against the cliffs, white spray bursting upward, as if to mirror the storm churning inside him. A glass of red wine shimmered beneath the lamp, but its warmth was not enough to quiet the questions spiraling in his mind. A businessman could value an entire company with a few lines of numbers, yet he could not find an answer to the simplest of questions. Who was she? Why, with just one gesture, had Claire Donovan managed to reach Lily's heart? The thought unsettled him, and at the same time, made him laugh bitterly at himself. Ethan, the man who had once commanded auditoriums filled with thunderous applause, now sat awake at night because of a waitress in a seaside cafe. If his colleagues in San Francisco could see him now, they would surely think he had lost his mind. And yet, in that fragile instant, when Lily smiled, her first smile in 3 long years of silence, Ethan knew there was something within Claire that none of the world-renowned doctors or celebrated therapists had ever been able to provide. Leaning back in his chair, he opened his laptop. With only a few calls and a brief search, her file appeared on the screen, more complete than he had expected. Claire had once been an outstanding student at UCLA, specializing in child psychology. Reports, research papers, professors' comments, all of them praised her as a rising star, a rare soul with an extraordinary ability to connect with children locked inside their own silent worlds. They said Claire seemed to hear the silent language that no one else could perceive. And yet, it had all come to an abrupt halt. 4 years ago, Claire disappeared from academia. No diploma, no thesis, no explanation. A brilliant star suddenly extinguished, vanishing like a meteor into the depths of the sea. Ethan pulled his chair closer to the screen, the blue light casting sharp lines across his tense face. He scrolled through each page of data, as though piecing together fragments of an unfinished puzzle. Claire Donovan, 27 years old, was now nothing more than a faint name on the employee roster of a small diner in Monterey. Ethan exhaled, equal parts astonished and bitter. A part of him simply refused to accept it. How could someone once hailed as a prodigy, with a radiant future ahead, reduce herself to a waitress living quietly among the damp streets of a coastal town? He tried to picture her in a white lab coat, standing before a UCLA lecture hall, her eyes shining as she spoke about child psychology. The image clashed completely with the Claire he had met at the Harbor Light Cafe, red hair tied hastily, blue eyes carrying a silent sorrow, sleeves dusted with flour. A faint smile tugged at Ethan's lips. Life was absurd. One day he could shake hands with top politicians, the next he was digging through the background of a waitress. Yet beneath that brief smile, he felt a heavy pull of unease. He knew too well that nothing in this world happened without reason. Behind Claire's disappearance, there had to be a story perhaps one more painful than he could imagine, and it was precisely that mystery that made him unable to stop thinking of her. The room grew so still that Ethan could hear his own heartbeat. The ocean wind whistled through the cracks of the window, carrying its briny scent. He closed the laptop and leaned his head back. In his eyes gleamed a familiar determination, the same resolve he carried when preparing to sign multi-million-dollar contracts. But this time, what he sought was not profit, it was truth. He had to know who Claire Donovan truly was, and why she of all people had been the one to ignite a smile on Lily's face. Outside, the waves struck the cliffs again and again, as if urging him to search for the answer. And dear listener, can you guess what lies hidden behind those sorrowful blue eyes? Believe me, if you walk away now, you will miss the revelation that will tighten your chest and bring tears to your eyes. The next day, Ethan returned to the Harbor Light Cafe. Morning mist still lingered over Monterey, while seagulls soared above the bay as if deep in conversation. He walked inside not with the presence of a CEO once praised by the press, but as a father carrying every fragile hope, placing them into the hands of a woman he had barely met. Beside him, Lily sat quietly in her wheelchair, her gaze empty like the winter sea. Claire Donovan stiffened when she saw them. Her hands were still dusted with flour from preparing pastries in the kitchen. Ethan wasted no time. His voice dropped firm and resolute. He needed her help for his daughter. No one else had done what she had made Lily smile, the first smile in 3 long years. Claire bowed her head, her small shoulders trembling, then shook it. She said she no longer had the right. The past had left a wound too deep, and she feared that if she tried again, she would bring only another failure. But then Lily's eyes, by chance, locked with hers. A fleeting moment that seemed to stretch forever. In those eyes was fragility, and also a plea no words could ever express. After several seconds of silence, Claire exhaled and agreed, but only for 3 days. No more. Ethan nodded, as though signing the most important contract of his life. Lily's room was on the second floor of the oceanfront villa in Carmel, facing the sea. Afternoon light spilled through the window, reflecting across watercolor paintings hung on the walls. On the first day, Claire sat in a small chair beside the bed. In her hands was a picture book about the ocean. Her voice was steady, soft, telling of seagulls skimming the waves. But Lily turned her face away, clutching her worn teddy bear, refusing even to meet her eyes. Ethan stood in the corner, his heart heavy as stone. He was used to this, every effort dissolving into nothingness. On the second day, Claire returned. She carried the same book, but this time also a few sketches she had drawn herself. As she read, her voice flowed gently, like the tide. And then, something small happened. Lily's fingers began tapping faintly against the armrest of her wheelchair. No one spoke, but Ethan, watching from behind, held his breath. It was not coincidence. It was a response. Awkward, trembling, yet in rhythm with Claire's voice. Ethan wanted to cry out but swallowed it back, terrified a single sound might shatter that fragile moment. On the third day, the room was charged with quiet expectation. Claire wore a pale blue dress, her red hair tied high, walking in as though stepping onto the silent stage of a theater. She carried no book, no drawings, only herself. She sat down, and her voice began to hum softly, an old lullaby her mother once sang. The melody was simple, like an embrace made of sound. Ethan stood still, every note floating through the air, seeping into the walls like salt water into stone. And then, the miracle happened. Lily looked up. Her brown eyes, once lifeless, glimmered with something long lost. She trembled, lifted her small hand and touched Claire's lily foes. A weak touch, yet filled with strength. Claire froze, her breath catching in her chest, her blue eyes shimmering with sudden tears. Behind them, Ethan's hand clenched into a fist, his heart on the verge of bursting. 3 years he had waited for this moment. Miracles are not born in laboratories, nor in framed diplomas on a wall, but in the patience of a heart that chooses to stay. And dear listener, do you believe 3 days are enough to heal 3 years of loss? Or is this only the beginning of a journey filled with even greater storms? If you find this story moving, take a breath and drop a 1 in the comments to continue listening. From that afternoon onward, Claire's presence in the oceanfront villa in Carmel became so familiar that Ethan could no longer recall how empty life had felt before. Each morning, as sunlight poured through the windows, she was already there, greeting them with a gentle smile, carrying little stories about the sea, about lazy seagulls that had overslept on the sand. Her simple gestures slowly became the thread that held together the atmosphere of a house long filled only with silence. Ethan began to notice the smallest of details. The way Claire brushed Lily's hair so delicately, her slender fingers separating each soft brown strand and tying it back with a purple ribbon. The way she gently wiped away the water when Lily accidentally spilled a glass, and instead of sighing, she simply laughed and said, "At least today it was just water, not coffee." Ethan laughed for the first time in months, surprising even himself with the sound. Those moments, seemingly small, stirred his heart to a rhythm that had been dormant for years. The man who had once thrown himself into tense boardrooms, signing multi-million-dollar contracts, now felt his pulse race only when he saw Claire lean down, placing a book softly into Lily's hands. One late afternoon, as the sunset spilled gold across the carpet, the three of them sat around the little study table. Lily fumbled with a pencil, her trembling hands trying to draw clumsy lines. Claire sat beside her, patiently guiding each movement. Ethan, seated opposite, reached out to hold the paper steady, and then it happened. His fingers brushed against Claire's hand. Just a touch, but it sent a quiet current surging through him. They looked up at the same time. Ethan's gaze met Claire's. "Why, sis?" Her green eyes flickered with alarm, while in his own there was warmth fierce, yet tender. No one spoke, no explanation was needed. In that fragile instant, Ethan leaned closer. The kiss was brief, trembling, yet blazing like a sudden flame igniting in the stillness of the room. Claire pulled away almost immediately. She shot to her feet, her cheeks flushed, her breath uneven. In her eyes, for a fleeting second, fear shimmered as if a shadow from her past had just broken free. Her voice was shaky, catching in her throat, barely more than a whisper. "I can't. I'm not the one you need." Lily looked up, her clear eyes uncomprehending of what the adults had just experienced, sensing only the sudden heaviness in the room. Ethan wanted to say something, wanted to reach out and hold Claire back, but his throat locked tight. He could only watch as she turned away and hurried out. That night, the villa by the sea sank back into its old stillness. The sound of the waves outside no longer soothed. Instead, they struck like knives against Ethan's heart. He sat in his study, staring at the small slip of paper left on the kitchen counter. In Claire's trembling handwriting, the words were clear. "I'm sorry. I am not worthy." Ethan clenched the note so tightly his knuckles turned white. He felt as though he were falling into a bottomless void. She was not only the woman who had made his daughter smile, not just someone who had stumbled into his life. Claire had been the fragile light after years of loss, and now that light had vanished, leaving behind a darkness deeper than before. In the quiet room, Lily sat beside her bed, hugging her old teddy bear, her eyes fixed on the window, as though waiting for a familiar figure to return. Ethan walked over, placed his hand gently on his daughter's hair. He knew he could not allow the story to end this way. And you, dear listener, do you believe a single rejection is enough to silence a heart already awakened? Or is this only the prelude to a journey filled with storms yet to come? Ethan refused to let that short note become the final period of their story. In all his years as a businessman, he had learned one thing. Every story has its roots, and if you want to change the outcome, you must trace it back to the beginning. Claire had not left out of hatred or indifference, but because some fear had its grip on her. Ethan knew unless he uncovered it, he would never be able to bring her back. In the days that followed, he dug through every fragment of information he could find. Academic records from UCLA, old articles, even a few professional forums. Each clue was like a piece in a jigsaw puzzle. And finally, the picture revealed itself. Claire once had a younger brother, Jacob, a boy with severe autism. From the time she was little, Claire had almost become a mother to him. Jacob never spoke much, but when Claire told stories, his eyes would light up. It was he who inspired her to pursue child psychology, with the belief that if she could help Jacob, she could help other children too. Then, tragedy struck, sudden as lightning from a clear sky. On what seemed like an ordinary afternoon, Jacob suffered a seizure. Claire had been right there, but she was powerless as she watched her brother slip away at only 12 years old. In that moment, every dream, every effort, every plan for her future collapsed. Guilt clung to her like a shadow, whispering that she had failed the most important person in her life. From that day, Claire left UCLA, packed away her dreams, and let them gather dust in the past. Ethan sat for hours before his laptop, the blue glow casting across his pensive face. A pain like that, he understood, was enough to suffocate an entire life. Now he knew the tremor in Claire's eyes. The time she pulled away, it wasn't from incompetence or indifference. It was fear of reliving that memory. She could not bear the thought of watching another child slip away, and she could not endure carrying yet another death inside a heart already full of fractures. Meanwhile, Lily sank deeper into silence. Each morning, she sat motionless by the window, her eyes wide as though searching for a familiar figure. The bowl of oatmeal before her remained untouched, the picture book unmoved on the table. Ethan tried everything to fill Claire's absence, reading aloud to his daughter, softly singing a lullaby his late wife once sang, even clumsily telling cheerful stories. But the only reply was silence. If there had been a contest for telling funny stories to children, Ethan thought bitterly, he wouldn't have even made it past the first round. Watching his daughter grow thinner, her small shoulders frailer, Ethan felt as though he were suffocating. The man once proud of his title as a tech millionaire, now felt no different than a failure. He knew there are battles money cannot win, and that the love of a father, no matter how fierce, sometimes needs another hand to lead the way. One evening, as the ocean waves pounded the cliffs like war drums, Ethan stepped out onto the balcony. He stared into the vast darkness, and a resolve rose within him. Claire had to return, not only for Lily but for herself, so she could be freed from the shadows of her past. He remembered Lily's eyes on the third day, when her tiny hand reached out to clasp Claire's moment. That moment had been like a lamp lit inside a darkened room. If Claire could do it once, surely she could do it again. The question was how to make her believe she was worthy. And, dear listener, do you believe Ethan has the strength to move a heart imprisoned by the darkness of its past? And will Claire dare to face the greatest pain of her life in order to return, or will she keep running forever? The night sky over Monterey was torn apart by sheets of rain and the howl of wind racing through the streets. Ethan drove through the gray curtain of water, both hands gripping the wheel, while Lily slept against his chest, her small face damp with mist. When he reached the Harbor Light Cafe, a faint golden glow spilled from inside, a fragile beam of light in the storm. Ethan pushed the door open. The bell above rang, sounding like a weary sigh of fate. Claire looked up from behind the counter, her tired eyes flickering with surprise. For a moment her gaze met Lily's. The little girl reached out with a trembling hand, her frail fingers brushing softly against Claire's cheek, as if pleading, "Don't go." That was all it took for every wall Claire had built to crumble. She broke down, tears streaming, mixing with the scent of sea salt, as she wrapped Lily tightly in her arms. Ethan stood still, then stepped closer, shedding the armor of a businessman who had long hidden his heart. His voice was low, choked, yet steady. "It's not just Lily who needs you. I need you too." It was not persuasion, but confession, a wound finally laid bare. From that day forward, Claire returned. She made no grand promises. She spoke of no forever. She simply nodded to each passing day. And each day, for Ethan and Lily, was worth more than any contract ever signed. Slowly, the oceanfront villa in Carmel transformed. Mornings filled with laughter as Lily tried to feed herself a spoonful of porridge. Afternoons colored by the soft sound of Claire's humming. Evenings when Ethan no longer sat alone with a glass of wine but read fairy tales beside Claire for Lily to hear. The miracle was that Lily began to change, little by little, from a faint smile to a bright ringing laugh, from shaky sips of water to holding the glass herself. And then, in the therapy room, she tried her first steps, legs trembling, yet steadfast, like waves crashing against the cliffs. Ethan and Claire stood at her side, hardly daring to breathe for fear of breaking the spell. When Lily took her third step, their applause rang out like fireworks inside that small room. None of them were perfect. Ethan was still clumsy at times, once boiling oatmeal over the pot so badly that Claire burst into laughter. Laughter so contagious Lily joined in. Claire still carried the scars of memory, sometimes waking at night with tears. Yet in those fragments they found the truth. Love does not come from perfection, but from mending the cracks together. Then, one sunset in Big Sur, as the golden light spread across the endless ocean, Ethan knew it was time. On the grassy cliff overlooking the sea, he knelt down, a simple silver ring trembling in his hand. The wind blew strong, but his voice was clear. "Claire, marry me. Not just for Lily, but because I love you." Claire froze. Tears spilled down her freckled cheeks. Years of running, years of telling herself she wasn't worthy now, it all dissolved like fog beneath the Sunday. She nodded. Lily in her wheelchair clapped her tiny hands in delight, her laughter chiming like wind bells in the ocean breeze. For the first time in 3 long years of silence, 3 broken souls had found one another again, not perfect, but whole. The story of Ethan, Lily, and Claire reminds us that miracles are not born in laboratories, nor written into million-dollar contracts. Real miracles come from patience, compassion, and love strong enough to stay, no matter the storm. Where love is, healing follows. And now, dear listener, I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a simple miracle that changed your life? Share your thoughts with friends and family here in the United States. Leave a day if this story touched your heart, and don't forget to share it so that others may find inspiration. Because who knows, the story you spread today may become the miracle someone out there has been waiting for.